So I've done cording 100 times. Well, maybe not that many, but I do have cording videos up. But I realize I don't really cover um, how to join them or where to join them or what shape they are or whatever. I just have never included that in the video. So I thought I'd catch that up because I saw a couple of you having trouble this week. Somebody said, "Did you make your top you have on?" It's a bought T-shirt, but I decorated it with applaud stitches because I didn't really like it plain. And now I really like it. I really like this T-shirt. So yeah, I've got two more plain ones and I'm going to do something similar on them. So what I'm going to do is I am going to show you how to make a piece of cording, just talk about problems people have with it, and then I'm going to show you how I join it on different things. Okay, so you're going to use your P5 foot if you have a baby lock. If you have a Benino, it's going to be the piping foot. So that's confusing because we also have a piping foot, but this is actually the cording foot. And you're always going to recognize it because it has a groove in the bottom. Okay, so that is the cording foot. And the idea is the cording runs along the groove. Now, of course, the easiest thing to do is to pull it out. So that's one thing we have to watch out for. But I'm just going to show you a few slides just to keep me on topic. So let's have a look. Right. So that's the cording foot, and you can. It also it's a 5 mm, so you can fit cording up to 5 mm. Of course, that means nothing to most of us because we work in inches, but anything around a quarter of an inch. But that said, I have gone thicker, okay, if it's soft. It has a groove on the underside, and the idea is to keep the cording in the groove. And there's also a P3 foot, which is for sort of heirloom type stuff, okay? So the biggest problem we have with cording is the cording. Okay, while it says quarter of an inch or 3/16 or whatever, I find there's so much variation between the different types. And even more importantly, there's a lot of very hard cording out there, which people often use, and it's just too hard. It's you really want something that's a little bit soft, has a little bit of give in it. And what I want to say is I have used really thick cording, like on my bag straps that I do, and it still fits through the groove. Okay, it sits on top of the cording, and if the cording's relatively soft, it works just fine. But if I use a 3-thread overlock wide, which is my preferred stitch for this foot, it's going to sew into my cording and then I have a problem. So how do we solve that? We use a narrow stitch. Okay, so I use the 3-thread narrow if it's very big cording. I never cut my cording with the knife. If I'm going across a piece of cording, I'll cut it with scissors. Okay, it's just unfair to use your knife. Some people find it gathers a bit as they sew it, and I think that comes from I think there's numerous reasons probably, but the one that I find most common is if you pull on the cording, it seems to feel right to pull on it, but don't, okay? Just let it feed in. Otherwise, you could gather the fabric underneath. The biggest problem people who are new to cording have is keeping two things. One, the cording in the groove, okay? They accidentally pull it out. But I think more commonly the problem is that they don't keep the cording in the fold of the fabric, okay? And that changes the thickness of the cording. So how to sew? You're going to wrap the fabric around the cording, matching the raw edges. You're going to keep the cording in the fold. You're going to make sure that your cording extends behind the foot. And that's really important because it allows the foot to be balanced. Otherwise, you're going up a mountain. Okay, so always do that. And do not trim the excess cording because it can be useful for when you actually sew it onto your project. We're going to use 3-thread overlock. Unless the cording is very thick, then we're going to use a 3-thread narrow. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to demo the next bit. So let's remove that. So I'm going to demo it, and I wanted to add two, which I didn't put in the notes, and I do want to mention it. It's like anything. If you're going to go around a curve, something circular or with a curve in, you're going to cut your fabric for your cording on the bias, okay? Just to allow it to go around the curve. If you're just sewing a straight line, a straight seam, then you don't have to. You can cut it just straight with the grain either way, okay? I often change the direction just to get the print, like I like stripes. So sometimes my stripes are running that way and I go across just to get the stripes, or perhaps I go lengthwise to get the stripe the way I want it. So I'm going to put you on this camera, and I'm just going to, let me just make that bigger. Okay. Right. So I'm going to take a piece of cording, and I'm using 3/16, which is probably my favorite. And you can see it's kind of a soft cable cord. And it's not really, really hard like rat tail or anything like that. And what I'm going to do is I am going to put it under the foot. And I'm going to make sure the back is extending out the back. And you can see the groove on this foot. It's kind of in the middle. And then I'm going to take a piece of fabric. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the center. Okay, that's the wrong side of the fabric. I'm going to fold it over. I generally cut my fabric about 1.5 inches. And then I'm just going to sew, but I can't tell you, let me pull you back a bit so you can see what I'm doing. I can't tell you how important it is to keep it in the fold. That's where people go wrong. So what I tend to do is I match my edges, and then I put my finger just gently on it so I know it's in the fold. Okay, and then just so it looks after itself. But if it comes out of the fold, then you're going to get uneven cording. And you can see me, I'm just putting my finger on it just to make sure that it's in the right place. It's right in the corner of the fold. I'm just going to sew it all because I might need it to do my next bit of sample. Everybody's writing up how cold they are. So I'm just keeping my finger on it just so that I know that it's in the fold. I'm kind of holding it in. It will want to stay in the groove. You know, the only way it will come out the groove is if you pull it out. Right. So there it is, and it's nice and even. Okay. So how do I attach it to, say, something square? So I have one I've already done here, and I'll explain why. I'll explain why now, because I'm going to sew over it. So what I've done is I've attached it to the edge, and you tend to find it's quite thick where you overlap it. So what I do is I get a pair of tweezers and I pull the cording out. Let's show you this end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it level, okay? So there you go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the cording and pull a bit of it out. Not too much, but enough that I haven't got that thickness anymore on the edge. And I'm going to put it back in again. And it's much thinner here now. So that really, really helps me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use exactly the same settings and the same foot, and I'm going to put the cording back under with some coming out the back because, of course, I want to balance my foot, and I am going to sew it onto here. But what I wanted to show you was on this occasion, sometimes it might just be that you've nicked your cording and it won't come out. So what I did, you see those black stitches? I went to the sewing machine and I just sewed over that area. And what that did was it flattened my cording, okay? So I'm going to put my needles in the cording, going to lift the cording and put, and you can see I'm not cutting anything, I'm keeping it level. And you can see it's going over the cording in exactly the right place. So when I come to look at it at the end, it's none of my stitches are going to show. And that's the magic of doing it on the serger as against a sewing machine. Okay, I lose interest on the sewing machine because I fight to do that. So there you have it. And then what I would do is I would cut this end, okay? And I'm just going to pull that piece of cording that I started with. I've already done the underside, so that's thinner. And I'm just going to grab it with my tweezers, try and pull it out. If I can't get it out, I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew over it. And I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch off and pull it back in place. And that just makes that corner thinner. Now, I could have just turned a corner. Let me do that. Sometimes you don't want to. The reason I like this method is you see how you get really nice 90-degree corners, and that I really like. So on this one, I'm just going to sew it, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to cut into the selvage, or it's not selvage, seam allowance, and I've got my needles in there. What I'm going to do is cut into it and turn the corner. And this method, it still looks good. I'll show you something I've done in it. But it's not quite such a square corner. So about 1/4 of an inch up, I'm going to clip into the seam, not go right the way through. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come straight off, keeping this edge level. So I'm still going to have to take it out and put it in again. And then this time round, I've got my corner there. I'm going to start there. Whoops, I'm coming off. You know, it's like when I'm demoing, something always goes wrong. I'm going to come off anyway, since I think I have. So let me show you the corner. You see how it's a little bit more of a curve, but it's still pretty acceptable. I mean, it's just a question of whether you want that curve or not. So let me show you a few things I've done with it. I'm going to come back in. Whoops. I went completely out. Right. So what I have done with it, ages ago, I did a live on doing cushion covers, you know, for outdoor chairs, and we did it all on the serger. And can you see for this one, I've just cut and curved around the edges. It's not totally sharp, except where I've joined, and when it comes to the end, you see how I've just overlapped it and gone off. And then what else do I have? I have this is one of my favorite pieces. The cording is, I put the cording on. How did I do it? I overlap the ends on this to get the really sharp square corners. And then I did my binding using my cording foot. So I kept my cording foot on because it ran perfectly over the cording and kept everything straight. These are like guidelines. They keep everything straight. So I did the binding using 3-thread overlock, the binding, and I used the fusible heat and fusible thread in the lower looper. And then all I did was pin it down and sew in the ditch round. So, you know, that's one of my favorite methods. You can see I really like this method because here I've done it on a table runner. No, actually, it's a It's an improv piece that we did in one of the online Serger classes. And this one, again, I overlapped because I do like that sharp corner. Right. And I'm also going to show you my straps because these are very thick cording, and I used a wide stitch. It came off, but normally I use a narrow stitch. Let me find a better sample that really does say what I want to say. So here we go. So this is one where I see how thick that cording is. It went over it fine, but do you see how I had to use a rolled hem? I used a rolled hem to finish that edge. And that's because if I'd used a wider stitch, it would have sewn through the cording and given me lots of trouble. So let's have a look back at so I've told you how I did my cording. This is for attaching it. You can sew it in seams too, and I do that. But here you can see the corner where I've overlapped it, and you're going to take the thickness out afterwards by pulling the cording out slightly and trimming it. And this is the one that I think gives people a lot of trouble sometimes, and that is a round one. Now for this one, I cut the fabric for the cording on the bias because I was doing a curve, okay? So that was the first thing. And the next thing is there is no way of really doing it any differently than just overlapping it. So I have, it's a bit battered, but it's an old sample. So let me just show you that. Whoops. Got to find the join. Okay, well, if it's that hard to find, you can tell it's not a big problem. So here we are. Can you see just there? I just overlapped it. And I would advise you to take the excess cording out if you can, just to make it a fraction narrower. But that's how I dealt with that one. So do I have any questions? I haven't seen any, but it doesn't mean there weren't any. So let's have a look at, the other thing is that on the Triumph, you have a combo foot. And what, if you look at it, you can use, I think you can use chain 1 and chain 2. I've only ever used chain 2. And what I did was I top stitched that bag down the cording. So let me take that out because I can show you the bag. I think Pat should be able to see it easier on that. But if you look at the yellow cording on this bag, can you see the yellow cording? And if you look closely, I top stitched beside it. And I just used that foot for that. So another thought. So what else did I do with it? Let's have a look. Because I think cording really adds class to any project, and it's so simple to do, and it adds another little bit of color, another little bit of detail that just adds to whatever you're making. So on the left there, that is my hobo bag. It's on my Teachable, and if you look, actually you can't really see it because it's so small, but I often use cording to divide between two sections. So in this one, I had a section that was Mexican wave, and it's the bright orange section in the middle. And if you look closely, you could just see a black and white cording just going above and below it, and it just frames it, and I like that look. And as I said, I use it quite often when I'm doing a binding for a quilt or table mat or anything else. The bottom picture with the orange flap, that one, I use the cording down the sides of the puffing, and that's very, very common. Even going back in history, they did that. It just holds the gathers together, and it's just a nice finish that accentuates the puffing. Picture of the cat bag, I just used it on the handles, and remember that was a thick piping, so I used a narrow stitch. And then we get onto my coat, and this is a princess line. And princess lines, it's all about the shape and to accentuate the shape and also to put a divide between the two different fabrics. I put piping down the front seams and actually the back center back seams, not center, but the two seams on the back. And that one I had to cut on the bars because I was going down a curve. But you see how it really accentuates the shape of that jacket. And so, I love that. And so Teta says, Erica Siskrin, I know who you mean, sells a combo attachment. She has a Facebook page. Yeah, I've actually got it. And I think if I remember rightly, it it puts the cording down when you put a binding on. So, but much as I like the idea and it's great, and I haven't actually used it because it's so quick to do a cording with a binding anyway. Could you give detail on top stitching the cording? Yes, give me a second because I'm not sure which needle I need to use for it, and I don't want to give you wrong information. So let me just test it. Yeah. So I'm just looking at my machine if you're wondering what I'm doing. You can use chain 1 or chain 2 chain needles and run over the cording. Let me just take that down for a second. So you can use chain 1 or chain 2 needles. There's no room for chain 3, okay? And that is because the groove in the cording foot is in the middle, so there's no room for chain 3. So you can use chain needle 1 or chain needle 2 or chain 1 and 2. And you just literally ride over your cording and you can top stitch it. I think, can you see that? It's a little gold stitch beside it. Kathy says, when you say top stitch like the yellow strip on the Ahoy bag, did you do that on the same machine? No, I used it with chain and cover stitch. Where do you get your roll of cording? I generally get mine from Warwack, but they haven't actually had my favorite size. It's a state it's in. That's what happens when you put it in suitcases. This is 3/16. It wouldn't hurt to be a fraction bigger, like 1/4 of an inch, but I like the fact that it's not overly it works perfectly on 7.5 stitch width. Okay, so when you're using the 01 needle. Thank you, Mary. No, I did not top stitch on the sewing machine. I used the chain and cover. Several of you have said that. And this one's just showing you that, again, I do that cording before I attach a binding, because then I just ride over it and do the binding with the cording foot. It's just that simple. So yes, that's my thing on cording. I think I've said everything I want to say about it. Let me just check my notes because I completely forgot to. Well, actually, they just say all that the other one says. And I have put the notes in the group, but I have never addressed how to sew it on 2 shapes. So I thought I would do that. Hi, Jill. So unless I have any other questions, I think that's all tonight. Yeah, I love the Ahoy bag. You made it, didn't you, Diane? Yeah. But the reason I did that top stitching on that particular bag was the more stitching I did, the more reinforced it got, because it's really quite a big bag. And when you've got lots of stuff in it, it's quite heavy. So, I was just happy to add more stitching to reinforce it. Because don't forget, I think that's where yes, it is. That's where the straps are, the under harness that goes inside. So yes, what is the name of the bag with your initials? This is the Ahoy bag, and it's in my Teachable, and I think my Teachable still got 20% off. You know, I can't remember what the code was. I will put it in here, unless anybody can remember it. I can't remember it. So I will just go to my computer and type that into the comments in a minute. Wave stitch recording. You could certainly use wave stitch recording. Yep, you certainly could. Now, the only thing I want to say in addition to all that is remember that it selects the width for you. So, you know, you can set your width as such, but it's going to be this far from the knife, you know. So I always say the cording foot dictates the width. So yeah. Have you done a demo on finishing the cording like on the round piece? Sorry, I forgot the name of the technique to close the pieces together. Ellen, I haven't set myself up to do a demo for that, but you're just going to literally cross one cording over the other cording and stitch off, and then I would hang on a second. I can probably manage one. Oh no, I don't have enough cordings. I do. So what you let me show you what you're going to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to go all the way around, just attach your cording to your oval, okay? And when you get to join them, you're just going to cross them over and come off. That's all you can do, okay? So let me show you that. Can you see the bottom below the roses? That's where I've come off. So I just overlap them. One's on the inside, one's on the outside. Mary says she had a hard time finding it. I always do the live on my public page, just so everybody can get access to it. If I just did it in the group, only the group people would. And if I do it in here, the stores can share, which they often do, you know, to help them with Serger education. Oh, please explain how to add cording and binding. That's like patting my head and rubbing my tummy at the same time. Yeah, I've got enough cording to do that. So that's another question. When you sew binding between pieces of fabric, the way I nearly always do it, it's going to move you over to the way I nearly always do it is to it's being awkward, right? And this is from couture dressmaking, really, is you always sew it to one side and then sew the other side. And that does give you a certain amount of thickness in the, you know, as far as stitches go. So let me cut my end off a bit. So here we have it. Always put the cording in first. It's like another pair of hands. And then you're going to lift it up and you're going to apply the cording and stitch. And if it stitches off, if it stitches off a bit, which it is for some reason, then don't worry, you know, it's going to be covered. I sometimes end up with some cut stitches, but that's okay. So what you do next is you would see, that's why you don't cut off the ends, because you're going to put it under, put it back. You're going to take another piece of fabric. It's the right side, so this is the right side. And you're going to, what I always do is get my needle in the cording so that it holds everything together. And then I lift it up, place my fabric. You'll note I'm not cutting because it's just easier to see the edges and put it in. And then I just sew. Now, if you think about it, I've got 3 lots of stitching there, which, you know, for some things does make for a thicker seam. Could I do better than that? Well, I could. I could be really brave, which I'm not. Well, it's not that I'm not brave. I'm very brave. I just don't do aggravation, you know. What I'm going to do is put my cording in. Okay, so it's coming out the back. It's going to push it a bit more out the back. I just think it's easier to do it the other way. I'm going to slide a piece of fabric underneath. I'm going to have the raw edges. Well, this hasn't got a raw edge, but the fabric has. Then I'm going to take the other piece of fabric, place that on top, and I'm going to control 3 fabrics all at once, which is really beyond my pay grade. Right. So here we have it. Okay, and that's less thread. It's just scarier. Okay. Actually, it wasn't that hard. I made it sound like it was hard. It's just I'm so used to doing it to one side and then the other. For a straight line, it's dead easy. For a curve, I don't know that I would do that. Is there a place I can go and watch past lives? Yes, absolutely. This group you're in is the group that has all of my lives, like 240 or something. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to the top where you have let me get there. Let me find my page and then I can do it. Right, if you go to the top of the page, you'll find a menu that goes along, okay? And it says things like members. No, I don't know what it says. I can't remember. But at the end, it says more. Okay, I know it's more. So at the end, it says more. And if you click on more, another menu comes up. And you'll see if you go down that it says videos. And if you click on those videos, you'll find about 240 videos in there of things I've done over a lot of years, you know. So you can look through. There's also a search. If you see that magnifying glass, if you want to do something like, oh, I want to do blind hem, then if you put blind hem in there, the chances are that one will come up. So yes, they're all in there. I tried to transfer them all to YouTube, but it actually takes so long to do. Now, I always have that annoying 10 minutes where I come in early and I'm just babbling. So you might always want to fast forward 10 minutes or 5 minutes. You'll see when I look serious and I start talking. And I generally start with a picture. So yes, you can watch them all. You can, what's it called? Binge watch. Or you can search for one you want. Anyway, I think that is it tonight. Thank you so much for coming in. If you're watching the recording, welcome. I generally edit it slightly and then put it in my group so that they don't have to wait 10 minutes to watch it. So there's a lot in there, but they're easier to find on my page, Deb Canham Studio, Serger Sanity, under more and then videos. Anyway, you all have a great week. Stay very warm. And if you're doing the applaud class, I'll see you Thursday. Other than that, it'll be 2 weeks till my next live. Okay, have a great week. Stay warm. See you. Thanks for coming in.